time. Here! Where's Sergeant Cutter? Here! Take your hands off that man.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I have an interesting one for you this week. We're talking about a film called Gunga from 1939. This film is really famous and total classic and has influenced a lot of other films and stories. It's a adventure, comedy, war film. So it's 19th century India, and there are 3 soldiers in the British Army. They are like best buds and have gone on lots of like hilarious adventures together when we meet them. And then one of them is like, I'm done, and he announces he's leaving to go get married. The other 2 are not happy about this kind of end of their brodom. So they drag him into like one last adventure when Gunga Din, of the title, he's an Indian water bearer for the British Army in India. So he's actually pro-British, which makes him a traitor to the Indian people. So he tells them about a thuggy uprising, and they basically set off to stop the uprising, so that a bunch of people don't get murdered or really slaughtered, because there's quite a lot of these thuggies. So the film is directed by George Stevens. So he did Giant, Shane, Place in the Sun, like massive classic movies that are all really good. Cary Grant is in this, from His Girl Friday, North by Northwest. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. is in this. He was in Little Caesar. This is probably like one of his, I think he sort of said like this was his masterpiece film. He was like a real Douglas Fairbanks Sr. was like in movies like from the start of movies. So he's kind of Hollywood royalty, I guess. He was in over 100 films. He married Joan Crawford. They were like the it couple of their day. And the last one of the 3 is Victor McLaglen, who was in The Quiet Man. And Joan Fontaine from Rebecca, one of my favorite movies. She plays her name's Emmy. She's the one that the guy that wants to get married, he's leaving to be with her. So yeah, this film is a bit of a one last hurrah kind of a movie. It's kind of about friendship and adventure and all that good stuff. It's based on a Rudyard Kipling poem called Gunga Din, but it's kind of has some of his other, I think it's Soldiers 3 is the other one that's kind of they've pulled from there as well. So it's Rudyard Kipling-esque as opposed to a true adaptation. William Faulkner also worked on this a little bit. He contributed, but I don't think he's actually credited because he wasn't like the main writer or whatever. So yeah, and Sam Jaff is the character Gunga Din. He is like Gunga Din is like the person this movie is named after, and yet he's really kind of sidelined. He's a very kind of, he's made to be like sort of comical, and yeah, I mean, Sam Jaff is not Indian, so he's in blackface for this movie. Douglas Fairbanks Jr. made a comment at some point that many Indian people watching this film thought it was shot in India, but it was actually shot on mostly sound stages and Encino Ranch in California. So this film is kind of famous for its visuals because I think that kind of the way that it managed to really create a sense of this exotic other place. So I think that's quite cool. I think it actually won an Oscar for that. And originally, a little fun fact, So originally they shot like an ending where Rudyard Kipling sort of appeared at the end of the film, and saw the big ending in this movie, and was inspired, and the Kipling's family were like, yeah, no, cut that, we hate that. So if you're watching the film, some of the cuts you will find of this have that scene added back in. Anyway, the Thuggee Uprising. So I might be pronouncing that slightly wrong, but this film is obviously told from the perspective of the soldiers of the British Army. So the Indian people having an uprising was like, they're the bad guys. The Indians in this film are also kind of amusing, childlike, superstitious. You know, they're sort of, the implication is that they're not very bright, shall we say. And I guess sort of that the British are doing them a favor in some way, bringing civilization. It's 1939, you know? So the Thuggee cult are kind of great. They're creepy. They're like a murder cult, is how they're often described. Can you imagine a murder cult? I mean, that's kind of great and horrible. But we actually get, when we say that like someone is a thug now, that actually comes from this, like not from this movie, but from the Thuggees. So that's kind of interesting. It actually comes from a Sanskrit word for like concealed. I think it means like concealed or secret. But also that these people are sort of violent and destructive without really understanding the situation, I suppose. Like kind of like a thug, as we say now. So for me, watching this, I think all the performances in it are really good and the camaraderie and stuff, but I didn't find it like mega exciting. Probably because, growing up, I saw a lot of adventure films, and I kind of, an adventure film from 39 is really not as exciting in a lot of ways as, what you would see now. So that's kind of my perspective, but I also couldn't quite get past these poor Indian people just being like as if they had no culture, or like it was very, I don't know, I've been really okay with it. So Bertolt Brecht, if you know Brecht, our old friend Bertolt Brecht, he saw this film, and I think what he says about it is really kind of spot on. He says it because the film is like fun and entertaining. We like it. It's a good story. It has good energy, and we like the people in it. But even when this film came out, we knew better. So he said this film, his quote is, "This film perverts our picture of the world." And I think, again, it's kind of negative to sort of look back on a film and be like, oh, to sort of focus on maybe, to project our political, social, understanding of now, like backwards. But I think some films in Hollywood, even at the time, people knew that they were not okay, and we can look back and be like, oh, this film was acceptable at the time, even though it actually wasn't acceptable at the time, perhaps. And the point that Brecht is making is that we know better. Watching this film, we know better. And yet we enjoy watching it. And so it kind of, you want to just ignore that aspect that's kind of putting down a culture, So that's something that I just kind of felt when I was watching it, honestly. That doesn't mean that you watch this film and you have to not like it, because it's quite a well constructed film. I also think I was just a little bored. I don't know. I just couldn't really engage with it and kind of get into it. So that's kind of my take on it, but I do kind of recommend it from a filmmaking perspective. This film is really influential. And I think if you're interested in film evolution over time, or even evolution of specific genres, you know, as an adventure film, as a film about like male friendship, it's very, you can kind of see a line from that to many other films that came later. So there was a bit of a trend when this film came out, of these kind of similar like screwball comedies that had this kind of soldier war thing going on. So Lives of a Bengal Lancer, Child of the Light Brigade, these both have this kind of thing, this sort of heroism and mateship and, you know, humor and stuff. So it is part of a kind of little bit of a movement at the time. I think this is probably one of the ones that's been more influential than the others. But yeah, this film was one of William Goldman's favorite films. So if you don't know who William Goldman is, he wrote The Princess Bride. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And I highly recommend, if you like movies, pick up any of William Goldman's books, because he's really funny and cynical, but he's cynical in like a not depressing way. You know, he's not being negative. He knows the film industry. So yeah. So he was really influenced by this film. I think he actually, even in the introduction to the book of The Princess Bride, he even mentions this film. So yeah, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, this film is referenced so much in that one, and I think even like sections of Gunga Din are kind of lifted for Indiana Jones, that particular movie, I mean. And also more recently, if you've seen The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson made the cast and crew watch this movie as part of like a 6-film package of films that they had to watch as influences on their, you know, performance and style and things like that. So yeah, it's basically like a buddy movie adventure classic, and I think the lightheartedness of it is really nice. I mean, not everything has to be serious and, you know, correct or whatever. It's an adventure, but I mean, it is kind of, I don't know, you wouldn't maybe get a film like this now. Also, I think sometimes Hollywood movies, especially older ones, kind of bother me in the way that they take like classic literature and just, you know, I mean, it doesn't bother me that much. Sometimes I kind of like it. Like some of the Edgar Allan Poe adaptations with like Christopher Lee and stuff like that. Some of those are so funny, and they have absolutely nothing to do with the story they're named after. So, you know, I have a sense of humor about these things, but I don't know. I don't think you really need to improve on someone like Rudyard Kipling. But, you know, it's a movie. It's meant to be fun. It's you know, I can imagine kids going to see this, or even adults going to see this on a Sunday afternoon back in the 30s. And I think this would have been a really good film, especially 39 was such a great year for so many films. So, you know, being fair, I kind of look at this film and I think I didn't personally love it, but I really can see the way all the actors are good, everyone has chemistry with each other, there's some great set pieces, the film looks really good, it's black and white, so it doesn't have like that Technicolor kind of, you know, you think of The Wizard of Oz, it's not kind of at that place, but it's yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good filmmaking and acting and things going on in this film, so it's worth seeing it for that. And also, I think as as somebody who just loves films, if that's, you know, if you want to know some film history or watch some classics, this one kind of has to be on your list. But I will say, like, there are films I love more that I found, you know, got me a little bit more. And I think that's probably because I think I've, you know, if you just kind of watch this film and you maybe weren't aware of like the historical thing, you know, the historical aspects of this, it might not bother you. But I mean, growing up, like most people now, you grew up knowing that it's not okay. So, although, you know, I wouldn't want the thuggy murder cult of this movie to go around killing a bunch of people, so I am glad that they managed to put down that rebellion. So yeah, complicated film, but a classic that has influenced a lot of cinema after it, and a great adventure story. It's just an interesting one, you know, film historically, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's Gunga Din from 1939. Maybe one to check out. And if you love this film, I would love for you to tell me in the comments what you love about it, what about it really gets you, or if you hate this film, let me know what it is that you kind of responded to with this one. Yeah, maybe you'll give it a watch if you haven't seen it, and I will have another classic movie for you next week.